心系，群山可汗。
One of my favorite aspects about Chinese weapons in the Ming Dynasty would have to be the variety in design, especially when it comes to the Dao. Now, this is between advances in bladesmithing and the fact that the Dao was still very common on the battlefield. It became a time of specialization, innovation, and even exploration. Variances of blade length, curvature, thickness, and shape were a result of battlefield interactions against both domestic and foreign enemies, which we can see an example of with swords that took design inspiration from the Japanese katana. Another important design aspect that contributed to the evolution of the Dao had to do with what the sword was fighting against. The heavy armored days of the Iron Pagoda and Hidden Forest armies were long gone, and it was a time of lighter and layered armor. One common type of light armor that was in use during this time was chainmail, as we can see in its inclusion in the Wu Beizhi imperial military records. Long chainmail tunics were typically constructed with a 4-in-1 design, meaning that 4 rings were connected to a single central ring. It is important to mention that chainmail did not see as much usage in China as it did over in the West. However, it was still quite common, and we can see this in military records from the Ming Dynasty Wu Beizhi and even into the Qing Dynasty in the Liqi Tushi. We can even see chainmail in paintings like this of the warrior Ayushi from the Qing Dynasty wearing a full chainmail covering on horseback. Chainmail is extremely resilient to slicing and slashing, and that's why you see even modern-day butchers wear chainmail to protect themselves from any accidental cuts on the job. Even back on the battlefield with full force impact from swords, the chainmail would not break, protecting the wearer from any slicing or slashing attacks. Chainmail is not perfect though. For one, it does not protect the body from impact. So although a slashing attack would not cut through the mail, the impact would be certainly felt. Chainmail also has a particular weakness to straight line thrusting and piercing, like from arrows, spears, and even jian, which makes it seem like it would rule out sabers. And that's where we get into Shayu Tao, or shark head saber design, as these swords were said to have been able to pierce through chainmail, with the straight back design for thrusting and a tip reinforced for piercing. It's named because the profile of this clip tip resembles the profile of a shark's head. Now, some historical examples would have a much longer flattened area, while others had a short clipped tip like the one you see here on this sword. There was nothing very specific or standardized in that respect. However, when we see blades shapes like this, we typically call them a Shayu Tao, or a shark head saber. This wasn't just a quick development in the Ming Dynasty. In fact, it is speculated to have started all the way back in the Song Dynasty with blades like this. The first development was to abandon the chisel tip for a curved shaped tip with a thrusting point, and that was done in forging by cutting from the spine to the blade edge. It was noted that this would also reduce the weight of the sword, increasing the speed and mobility without losing structure. The next big milestone was to continue to reduce weight by removing an amount of steel from the spine of the sword, which also shifted the design from a straight back blade to more of a curved blade. This method was pushed even further to make the tip much thinner for enhanced piercing ability. However, as we get into the Ming Dynasty, new methods of forging the tip are implemented, and instead of removing steel from the spine of the sword, steel is removed from the edge side of the sword. This is where we get into true Shayu Tao territory, with a more robust structure to aid with piercing and a tip curvature to aid in cutting. We can even see evidence of weight reduction on this sword, of course with the shark's head itself, but something you may not notice in the video, it's a little bit difficult to see, but there's actually been weight reduction from the spine, and there's some slight, very, very slight curvature, which actually makes this sword not perfectly straight. Now, these were not the only methods of weight reduction. In fact, the grooves serve for more than just fancy design, as the steel that's removed serves as a way to reduce the weight of the sword. That and the amount of distal taper that happens from the guard all the way down to the tip is quite extreme, which make this sword very, very fast, yet it's still able to retain its structure and balance. The blade is 28 inches long and forged of a 1065 carbon steel and T9 tool steel. And the point of balance rests at 4.5 inches above the guard, which makes it very lively. It has a black faux ray skin under the black woven handle wrap, and there is a floral designed brass open rivet to pass a lanyard through the handle for better control. The blade is secured with a pin that is seated nicely into the pommel. All of the fittings are iron, with the typical Ming style fangshi squarish fittings. However, these are rounded for a comfortably smooth grip. On the guard are twin decorative panthers, which show how this sword gets its name. But it is also a display of prestige and even possibly rank, invoking the ferocity of the beast. The scabbard is made of lapacho wood, painted crimson red with a high gloss finish for a very classy look. The iron fittings on the scabbard are smooth and simple, yet refined with added scrolling to the attaching loops. There is one thing I find to be quite interesting about this scabbard design, and on the surface it's pretty straightforward, or actually literally straightforward until you get to this little bit of curvature right at the end. But when we actually place the sword over the scabbard, we find that that curvature is actually an added length, which could serve as a design function just to show that this is a saber and not a jian. However, I find that straight scabbards are not as easy to index where the blade edge will be, even in the case like this one where you have a wider back and narrower front. It can still be deceiving when quickly grabbing the scabbard. So not only does this serve as a visual cue for blade edge indexing, but it also acts as a counterbalance to keep the sword right side down when it is slung at the side. Once this sword is out of the scabbard, it is truly something special. With all the weight reduction, it is very nimble and accurate. It has tip control like a jian, yet it functions as a dao. And with the rounded fangshi fittings, it is a very, very comfortable grip that doesn't tire or fatigue, and it fits perfectly for forms routine and martial arts training. This is an excellent sword to get if you currently train in Chinese martial arts and want to practice and train with something more historically accurate. It is very nimble and responsive for forms training, and even more so in cutting and thrusting applications. I put this sword through a couple of tests specifically for the thrusting capabilities, and the results were quite impressive. The sword has excellent tip control, much like a jian, and piercing was actually more efficient and easier than I had expected. The sword had a good plunge depth when dropped from 20 centimeters above the target, and the freestanding target was easily pierced, even with a single and double layer of cloth draped over. This sword is so much fun when it comes to cutting soft targets. However, everything that makes it better for piercing is a little bit of a drawback when it comes to cutting heavy targets. The lack of a curve and the lack of weight to push through the target don't make it impossible by any means. However, getting through heavier targets requires a little bit more accuracy and precision in your cutting to keep your blade edge alignment going and to power through your target. So again, not impossible, but a little bit trickier. That leads me to believe that this sword was used in very specific contexts, where opponents would have light or no armor at all and could be dispatched with thrusts, slashes, and surface cuts in types of fighting where speed would be more important than cleaving power. You can almost think of it as a dao that moves and acts like a jian. Overall, I find this blade to be an exceptional sword for modern day use, whether your goal is to use it for cutting applications or forms training. It moves lightning fast and is very effective in the thrust and cut. It also has a very beautiful presentation, from the black on black handle to the guard decorations and this classy red scabbard. It's an all-around winner in my book. If you want to know more about this sword, hop on over to LK Chen's website. I'll leave a link down in the description below. Otherwise, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this sword and questions if you have any. So drop them down in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.